The first time Tyler Kincaid smirked at me across the boardroom table, I knew the devil didn't wear Prada. He wore Allbirds and a LinkedIn bio that said visionary leader. He'd been on the job 3 days, walked in with his sleeves rolled up, a $7 green juice, and a mission to make Broxton Tech leaner and future-facing. Translation? Strip the soul out of a company and slap buzzwords on the corpse. He pointed at the massive black binder on the corner shelf, my binder, and said, "We'll clean up this ancient junk. No one reads binders anymore." The room chuckled. I didn't. You ever feel your blood go cold but your face stay polite? That was me. I'd poured 10 years into that ancient junk. Every audit trail, every protocol signature, every vendor certificate that let this company land defense contracts worth more than his whole career. He had no clue what he was erasing. That binder wasn't nostalgia. It was legal architecture. One page wrong and the whole damn building falls. Quick pause. Since 97% of folks listen without subscribing, it'd really help the team if you hit that button and tap like. Keeps these stories coming. Anyway, Tyler kept smiling like a man who thought he'd already won. Called me mom once in a Slack message. Let's get mom's sign off before we archive the old stuff. I was 52, 2 years from cashing out my pension plan and riding into early retirement. But this wasn't about pride, it was about precision. And Tyler? He was sloppy. He came from some VC-backed startup that imploded under its own self-importance. They made an app that was supposed to revolutionize compliance, but forgot to encrypt user data. I read the SEC report. He was listed as Chief Disruption Officer, which I guess means guy who sets fires then blames the wind. Now he was here, walking the halls like Caesar at a county fair, firing off orders to streamline the process. My process. His optimization plan included interns auditing our compliance logs using ChatGPT and Google Sheets. He told finance we'd sunset the legacy record warehouse and use a platform called Neon Hive, which sounded less like software and more like a vape flavor. And that binder? That wasn't just a record, it was a trap. And I had laid every inch of it. I didn't argue. Arguing with boys like Tyler is like yelling at a vape cloud. It dissipates before it hits anything solid. I nodded. Took notes, let him call me redundant, and I waited. See, 10 years ago, during a DoD certification push, I'd quietly buried a clause into our compliance infrastructure, Clause 13F. It wasn't flashy, most folks never saw it, but it had teeth. If anyone tampered with certified compliance documentation during an active federal procurement cycle, and if the original custodian and me wasn't the one initiating the change, it triggered a mandatory internal lockdown. Systems freeze. Assets locked. Legal forced to pause operations until reviewed by external counsel and, get this, until the original custodian signed off. But here's the real kicker. The clause wasn't digital. It was signed. Wet ink. Filed. And then backed up externally on a mirror server registered to my name, not Broxton, not IT, mine. Every quarter, I updated it. Every time we recertified, every time someone like Tyler said, "We're moving fast," I just nodded and documented faster. So when Tyler leaned back in his ergonomic chair at that meeting, clapped his hands and said, "All right, people, next week we begin digital spring cleaning. Time to retire the paper dinosaur." I closed my notepad, stood up, and quietly left the room. Let them laugh. Let them sweep through my files like toddlers with crayons. They had no idea that binder in the corner wasn't full of paper. It was full of triggers, and one arrogant little man-child had just started pulling them. 2 days later, I walked into the file room and caught an intern elbow deep in one of the archive drawers, like she was searching for snack bars, not signed contract certifications. She smiled. "Hey, Tyler said we could start cleaning out old files. Streamlining." She held up a folder, Vendor 427C, including their DoD chain of custody affidavits, and added, "This stuff's like pre-2018. He said anything older than 5 years is compliance compost." His words. I nodded once and walked away before I said something that'd get me written up by HR and escorted out by security. Turns out, streamlining was Tyler's new religion, and he was baptizing the interns in ignorance. Some poor kid from marketing was tasked with going through server logs and flagging redundancies. Another was told to simplify the vendor onboarding binder, which was corporate speak for /legal protections until the company becomes a piñata for auditors. The next morning, I brewed my burnt office coffee, opened my inbox, and there it was. Subject: Internal Optimization Audit Initiative. Sender: Tyler Kincaid. Recipients: all. It started with his usual chest-puffing TED Talk in an email language. As part of our evolution into a modern, agile enterprise, we'll be performing a full audit and purge of outdated compliance material. Any records predating 2020 may be sunset unless specifically flagged by a department lead. Let's unclog the arteries of bureaucracy. That last line was in bold. I stared at it long enough to drain half my mug. No attachments, no disclaimers, no audit sign-off from legal. He'd sent it like he was announcing a pizza party, not unleashing a paper shredder on a federal contractor during a pre-bid eligibility review. I walked straight to the break room. I needed to hear it from someone else's mouth before I did what I was about to do. Sure enough, on the couch sat Sherry from finance and Malik from legal, whispering like middle schoolers swapping test answers. They say we're trying to land the Stratton Systems bid, Sherry whispered, glancing over her shoulder. That's federal. Military-grade compliance, top-tier vendor list. Does Tyler know what that means? Malik asked. Sherry laughed like a woman already filling out job applications. Back in my office, I pulled up my notes. Stratton Systems wasn't just any bid. It was a $180 million 3-year contract under the Federal Acquisition Regulation, the kind that comes with teeth. The kind that doesn't care how many interns you've got copy-pasting jargon into Notion docs. You screw up documentation, even once, and you're blacklisted for a decade. And Tyler? Tyler was currently holding a meeting on a goddamn beanbag, I later learned, pitching his clean sweep compliance vision to the board. How do I know? Because the walls in Broxton are made of hopes and drywall. I heard every word. We've got a legacy paper trail that's bogging us down. Honestly, some of it was written by people who probably still think fax machines are cutting edge. Pause. Chuckle. No offense to our senior team, he added, as if that was some kind of magical HR shield. Then came the kill shot. Look, we've got dead weight, legacy processes, legacy mindsets. If we want to land Stratton, we need to show them we're forward-thinking, not stuck in the past with some binder lady who's been here since the Bush administration. Binder lady. That one echoed. Not compliance architect, not named custodian, not the only reason we've never been fined by the feds. Binder, lady, he didn't say my name. But he didn't have to. Everyone knew who'd maintained those logs, who'd built the server tagging system, who had laminated every goddamn access chart during the pandemic when the rest of the execs were Zoom day drunk in Cabo. And now, while interns were blackbagging my documents, he was on the top floor calling me dead weight to board members who nodded like they understood what Clause 13F even was. It wasn't ego, it wasn't even anger, it was dread. Dread at watching a blind man rearrange a minefield. Because I knew what came next. The federal pre-audit would request documentation. They'd look for the retention logs, the certifications, the initials on the logbooks, the reason why we even had a compliance department. And when they asked who was responsible for maintaining it, all eyes would turn toward the office with the binder and find a hollowed-out desk with a pink post-it labeled streamlined. You ever watch a man brag while steering a bus off a cliff? I did, and I had the brake line in my pocket. The auditorium smelled like someone microwaved ambition and cheap cologne. That meant Tyler was about to present. Again. All hands, he'd titled it, like we were about to rally behind a noble cause instead of watching a frat bro in khakis dismantle years of compliance infrastructure between mouthfuls of his own brilliance. I took a seat in the back row, same spot I always did, near the exit, just in case I needed to slip out before my blood pressure popped like a shaken soda can. Tyler strutted across the stage like he was auditioning for a TEDx talk titled How to Wreck a Company in 90 Days or Less. Behind him, a giant screen lit up with a slide labeled Operational Spring Cleaning. All right, team, he started, clapping his hands like a kindergarten teacher who'd just done a line of espresso. Let's talk house cleaning. You all know we've been carrying some legacy baggage. Thousands of documents, obsolete systems, outdated procedures. He turned toward the screen and clicked through a few slides. Images of manila folders, file rooms, even a stock photo of a dusty server rack. Here's the truth, he said, spinning back around with that born-again grind-set gleam in his eye. We're done hoarding junk. Compliance should be automated, clean, fast. No more binders, no more 5 signature authorizations for a coffee order. We're building a modern machine, and every machine needs a purge cycle. Chuckles from the front rows. mostly marketing and ops, the ones who thought policies were vibes. Tyler beamed like he'd just cured cancer by deleting a spreadsheet. I've already greenlit the cleanup. Teams are identifying and removing anything older than 2020 unless flagged critical. And spoiler alert, very little has been flagged. I didn't blink, just breathed in slow. Then he dropped the line. Oh, and don't worry, we're taking good care of the dinosaur binder, he said, making air quotes. I think we might put it in the lobby as a conversation piece. Laughter. Louder this time, even a few claps. I stood up, quietly, no drama. Just gathered my notebook, slid my pen into the spiral binding, and walked out before he could milk the moment for more smirks. Down the hallway, past HR, past legal, past 2 interns dragging a rolling bin full of files labeled archive, shred pending. I kept walking. Back in my office, I shut the door, locked it, opened my desktop, typed 1 line. To Barrett Levine at Kilburn Greaves Law, com. Subject, 13F activation. Body, activate 13F. I hit send. No CCs, no flare, no drama, just a legal nuke sliding across the wire. I opened my inbox, scrolled back to Tyler's all-hands follow-up email, where he recapped his speech like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. Cleanup begins this week. Thank you all for embracing the new future of Broxton. Let's get lean. I clicked reply. No greeting, no sign-off, just 1 word. Done. I clicked send. Then I stood up, stretched my back, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Because that 1 word didn't mean I'd shredded old folders or signed off on his circus. It meant the lock had been turned. The trap sprung. Clause 13F wasn't theoretical. It was binding. It was buried deep in our compliance charter, ratified by legal, signed off by the founder, and updated quarterly by me. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that any unauthorized tampering with compliance systems, files, or documentation during a federal pre-contract phase would trigger a full asset lockdown, legal review, and operational pause until external counsel cleared all activities. It didn't require IT to run it, didn't need an engineer. All it needed was 1 email, from me. And that email had just landed on Barrett Levine's desk. Barrett, our external compliance counsel, and a man who once shut down a $90 million deal in under 4 hours when a vendor forgot to list a subcontractor on their site access log. He wasn't going to wait for a meeting or a Zoom. He was going to flip the switch. And Tyler? Tyler was still probably on stage, toasting to efficiency with lukewarm La Croix, oblivious that the moment of no return had passed. Not with a bang, not with a scream, with an email, a timestamp, and a binder no one bothered to read. The funny thing about setting off a corporate bomb is how quiet it is at first. No sirens, no flashing red lights, no screaming executives running down hallways like Wall Street on fire. Just silence. Like the whole building is holding its breath. I spent the next hour casually sorting my desk, rearranged my pens, flipped through an old file labeled 2014 vendor transfers, pre-redline versions, just for nostalgia. My phone buzzed once. Barrett, subject, re-13F. Message acknowledged. Countdown initiated. 00:59:34. I leaned back in my chair. That was the clock. Once 13F was activated, we had exactly 1 hour until full lockout. Systems, databases, vendor access, financials, all on ice pending legal clearance. The clause wasn't a policy, it was a system-level kill switch with legal teeth and auto triggers buried across our infrastructure. Invisible, unless you knew where to look. And Tyler? Tyler didn't know squat beyond his own reflection. Down the hall, I heard someone laughing, probably still riding high on that all-hands ego parade. I waited another 10 minutes, then grabbed my keys and purse, took the long way out through the compliance wing. That's when I spotted her, Jenna. Fresh out of grad school, still had that nervous puppy look like she expected a gold star for labeling folders. She stood frozen outside the shared compliance drive on her monitor, clicking and frowning. Something wrong? I asked, sipping my now cold coffee like we weren't standing on the edge of digital detonation. She blinked up at me. I'm trying to pull the Q1 audit log templates, but it says the drive's inaccessible, and the chain of custody register? It's gone. Like, poof. I said, keeping my face neutral. You flag it yet? Tyler said they probably moved it to a new location. Said they're de-bloating the server. She used air quotes like it might protect her from the fallout. Sounds about right, I said. Let me know if you need anything. I kept walking. Tyler wasn't going to listen to Jenna. He wasn't going to listen to anyone. Not until the whole structure groaned under its own weight. That's the thing about men like him. They mistake silence for consent, stillness for surrender. But silence is a choice. And I had made mine. By the time I hit the parking garage, my phone buzzed again. Message from Barrett Levine status update. Legal hold initiated. Initial flags detected on Stratton pre-bid systems. External review inbound. Translation. The first locks were starting to click. I stopped at my favorite coffee shop. Ordered a medium drip and one of those awful granola bars they keep by the register. Ate it anyway. Watched the steam rise off the cup like smoke from a fuse. Back at Broxton, Tyler was probably telling some intern to wipe the junk off another shared drive, thinking he was optimizing us for greatness. Maybe he was planning a keynote about how to lead through data disruption. Maybe he was still calling me binder lady. Didn't matter. Because the binder, that was the trigger. And the timer was still ticking. As I sat by the window, sipping calmly, the world continued spinning like nothing had changed. The janitor swept the sidewalk, a bus honked. 2 teenagers walked by, arguing about which Marvel villain had the best redemption arc, and back inside Broxton. They were about to meet mine. By the time the first real crack formed, the smell of smug still hadn't left the top floor. At 9:07 a.m., the security log anomaly alert started pinging, soft at first, like raindrops on a metal roof. 3 failed authentications on the vendor archive portal. 5 restricted file trees sealed themselves mid-session. The compliance analyst in charge of vendor vetting tried to upload a procurement affidavit and got booted with a red banner that read, "Access suspended pending external verification." He thought it was a bug. Rebooted. Tried again. It wasn't. At 9:13, a ticket came into the IT queue marked Priority 1, CFO Access Denied. Tyler was in a strategy meeting, whiteboarding phrases like vision velocity and elastic culture scaffolding when his phone buzzed. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Then lit up with a call from the CFO. "I can't open the Stratton proposal folder," she snapped, not even pretending to hide the panic. "And the financials from last quarter are frozen. Why is my dashboard locked?" Tyler waved at his assistant. "Probably a migration hiccup. We're restructuring servers. It'll sort itself out." Spoiler, it would not. Downstairs in legal, Christine, the same attorney who once shut down a shady subcontractor with nothing but a footnote in a procurement clause, was scrolling through a document so fast her mouse nearly flew off the desk. "Hey," she called out to the junior associate. "Pull up the compliance charter. I need to confirm something. What's clause 13F? The associate blinked. 13 what? Christine's voice dropped a half octave. 13F. Pull it. Now. The kid typed like his fingers were on fire. Meanwhile, finance tried accessing their ledger export script. It crashed. Ops pinged the shared Stratton vendor timeline. Locked. One of the security vendors we use for third-party background checks emailed that their integration handshake had been flagged as unverified and suspended. Stratton's legal portal, which had been set to receive our next set of compliance proofs, bounced the request with a generic error. Certification pending review. Access denied. Then, at 9:26, Christine stood up with the force of someone who just read their own obituary. "Jesus," she whispered. Clause 13F. Mandatory asset lockdown in event of unauthorized compliance tampering. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a full systems-level safeguard, signed off by the original compliance architect, tied to both internal and external audit systems, with mirrored backups for verification, and worst of all, it had already been triggered. She stormed into the hallway, heels pounding, and marched straight to Tyler's office, where he was still beaming at his precious whiteboard. "Tyler," she barked. He turned, half laughing. "Hey, Christine, listen, don't worry about the access hiccups. It's on it." She tossed a printed sheet of the charter onto the table. It landed face up. Clause 13F. "Tell me," she said slowly, "did you authorize the deletion of any compliance documents tied to a named custodian?" Tyler blinked. Yeah. I mean, we've been cleaning house. That whole binder nonsense was slowing us down. Why?" Christine didn't blink, didn't breathe. "Because you just set off a federal-grade lockdown protocol. This isn't IT, it's legal infrastructure. We're not just locked out, we're under review." Tyler scoffed. Okay, but that must have been an old clause. Probably never enforced. It was updated last quarter, signed, ratified, and tied to an external council trigger. Tyler stared. Wait, you're telling me this binder clause shut down our systems? No, Tyler, she said, voice flat. You did. At that same moment, 2 floors down, Barrett Levine logged into the external mirror servers that didn't belong to Broxton but were verified under our federal audit continuity plan. He watched as the compliance asset control system ticked over into lockdown phase 2. Anomalies confirmed. Triggers validated. Clause 13F active. All because one man didn't read past page 12 of a document he'd ordered interns to shred. The locks were no longer snapping. They were sealed. The boardroom was mid-presentation. Tyler had just clicked to a slide that read, Broxton's future, streamlined, scalable, secure, in bold white text against a black background. He stood in front of it like a Silicon Valley prophet, hands folded with faux humility, voice syrupy smooth as he pitched Broxton's readiness for federal expansion. Around the table, directors nodded politely, some bored, some confused, most just wanted to hear that the Stratton contract was within reach. I wasn't there. Didn't need to be. My part was done. The rest was a slow, televised car crash, just as Tyler launched into a half-baked metaphor about how Broxton was trimming the fat so the muscle can grow. The door burst open so hard it ricocheted off the stopper. Christine, lead counsel, stormed in with 2 printed packets in one hand and a phone still on call in the other. Everyone stop. Right now, she said, loud enough that one of the directors actually dropped his pen. Tyler blinked. Christine? What? She didn't let him finish. Clause 13F just went live. We are now in a mandatory asset lockdown under external legal review. As of 9:31 a.m., all compliance-related systems, servers, audit chains, and procurement documents have been frozen. Wait, what? Someone from the board asked, leaning forward. What clause? She tossed the document on the table. The director scanned the top line. Clause 13F, mandatory asset seizure protocol in event of unauthorized compliance tampering. Tyler gave a little laugh. Too quick, too loud. Okay, let's all take a breath. This sounds like some outdated policy relic. We're just cleaning up old files. Nobody seized anything. Christine turned to him slowly, voice clipped like a guillotine. Did you authorize the deletion of any documents tied to a named compliance custodian? He hesitated. That was enough. One of the directors looked up. What does that mean? It means, she said, not breaking eye contact with Tyler, that someone bypassed the only person legally allowed to alter our audit trails during an active pre-certification window tied to a federal contract. It means we just tripped a clause that treats internal tampering like a breach in chain of custody protocol. We were just streamlining, Tyler snapped, heat rising. We were removing redundant legacy systems. And now you've triggered a clause that hands over operational authority to external counsel until the review is complete, Christine said. You've locked the company down. Then unlock it, Tyler barked, looking around. Call it. Tell them to revert. It's not ET, she said coldly. This isn't a tech fail. This is compliance protocol, designed to activate without internal override. Someone on the board coughed into his sleeve. Another director flipped through the printed copy, eyes wide. And who the hell designed this clause? The CFO asked, already checking her phone. Christine nodded toward the door. She did. That's when I walked in. I hadn't been called, but Christine and I had a silent rhythm after 10 years of disasters averted. I stood at the threshold in my slate blazer, holding the original signed copy of Clause 13F. This clause, I said, laying it flat on the table, was ratified 6 years ago, re-signed every year, most recently updated 3 months back. Every line was approved by legal, founder initialed, and tied to our federal readiness charter, including external mirror backups and auto-trigger points if tampering occurred. Tyler looked at me like I'd just confessed to murder. You planned this? No, I said. I documented it. Why would you even create something like this? Another director asked. Because I've been through 4 COOs, 3 CFOs, and 6 VPs who all said the same thing. Clean up the old stuff. And every one of them underestimated the risk. Tyler turned to the board, frantic now. You can't be serious. We're talking about a binder and some PDFs. Christine raised a hand. No, we're talking about a $180 million federal contract that now requires written clarification that Broxton has not compromised internal compliance integrity. And as of this morning, we can't guarantee that. You did that, Tyler. The room went silent. Christine's phone buzzed. She checked it. External counsel is assuming control of compliance systems effective immediately. They'll be contacting Stratton's legal team by close of business. Tyler dropped into a chair like the floor had given out beneath him. No one moved. No one spoke. The system was in control now. And Tyler? He was just another unsecured variable, one that had finally, fatally been flagged. The board reconvened after lunch, but the mood in the room had turned the color of ash. Gone were the confident nods and scripted smiles from earlier that morning. Tyler was nowhere to be seen. Rumor was he'd locked himself in the wellness room to process, whatever that meant. What remained was tension, thick, hushed. Legal pads were open. Pens hovered. No one wanted to be the first to ask the question, but eventually the chairman did, voice quiet as if afraid to disturb something sacred. Who put this clause in place? Christine didn't hesitate. She looked up from her printouts and with the weight of a woman who had just watched a decade of her own work nearly evaporate because of one man's ignorance said, "She did," and pointed to me. I was already waiting outside, like some summoned ghost. They didn't send someone to fetch me. The door opened and I stepped in on my own. No blazer this time, just a dark sweater, the same kind I always wore when the systems went down or the auditors came early. I didn't sit. I didn't need to. On the table in front of me, I laid a single document, crisp, original, still faintly smelling like the metal cabinet where I'd kept it for years. Clause 13F, signed by the company's founder. Ratified by legal, bound to my certification as named compliance custodian, renewed every fiscal year. Last updated 97 days ago, still active. The CEO stared at it like it was written in runes. One of the directors flipped to the second page and exhaled audibly when he saw the founder's scrawl, the signature they all revered. Above it, my name, plain and unpretentious, just as it appeared on every compliance charter and external audit contact list since 2013. I said only what needed saying. This clause was never hidden. It's on page 48 of the Compliance Continuity Framework. Every executive receives that manual on day one. Christine added, it's also referenced in every version of the company's Federal Procurement Readiness File. Stratton has it on record. The board chair cleared his throat. And these mirror backup servers, who owns them? I met his eyes. I do. That landed like a gavel strike. He opened his mouth, probably to ask what authority I had to do that, but Christine answered first. She owns them through a separate custodial agreement filed with our external counsel. The servers were registered as continuity insurance during the 2018 compliance overhaul. They're verified under both our risk coverage and federal data recovery protocols. Another director squinted. Wait, you're saying our entire federal audit trail is housed on servers, not owned by Broxton? Christine nodded. Not owned by Broxton, but registered for Broxton. As per Clause 13F, access transfers back to internal systems only after full legal clearance and sign-off by the original custodian. There it was. The silence changed. Not angry, not awkward, just adjusted. Everyone in the room recalibrated, because the woman they'd ignored for years, the one who took notes, kept receipts, and made sure every policy matched its signature, was the only person with the authority to reverse what had just happened, and I didn't offer it, not yet. I'll cooperate fully with the review, I said, but until it's complete, no system reentry should be attempted. That includes IT workarounds, vendor sync attempts, or file restoration scripts. Any breach of that would be a federal escalation. Christine backed me immediately. She's right. That would move it from internal protocol failure to full violation of federal contract terms. Stratton would pull the bid. The board didn't argue, because they couldn't. The system was built to run without trust, just proof, chain of custody, authorizations, and when they let Tyler trample that for the sake of efficiency, they also handed me back control. Control I never asked for, just prepared. I turned to leave. Someone murmured, "Why didn't she warn us?" Christine replied before I could. She did. Every quarter, every clause, every document. You just didn't read them. The door shut behind me, And in the server logs that only I still had the keys to, federal compliance partners were already combing the mirror systems, quietly, methodically, and without needing my voice. Just my name. The official memo came out that afternoon. Subject: Organizational Realignment, Interim Operational Safeguards. Buried beneath 3 paragraphs of HR safe language was one real sentence. Tyler Kincaid is suspended effective immediately pending external compliance review. Just like that, the golden boy with a TED Talk complex was gone. No farewell Slack messages, no corporate eulogy. Just silence and an access badge that now read revoked in the system I'd built. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel bad. It just felt clean, like wiping a whiteboard you never asked to draw on in the first place. Legal began calling me back in, though I'd never really left. The difference now was tone. Gone were the passive-aggressive CCs, the meetings where I sat through 20 minutes of Tyler explaining the importance of lean thinking, while I held the actual clause that made the meeting even legal. Now, they asked, waited, listened. Christine scheduled a working session. Just her, the board's compliance liaison, and me. No assistants, no execs, just paper, policies, and control. We're rewriting the entire document protocol, she said, laying out the framework. Standardizing update logs, redlining flag visibility, requiring dual attestation for future policy deprecations. I nodded. Clause 13F will need revision too. Christine glanced up. What do you want to change? Add dual control authority. 1 custodian can trigger, but 2 required to deactivate. That way the clause is future-proofed. She paused. You sure? I looked at her. If I die tomorrow, the company can't afford to be this blind again. She nodded, quietly impressed. Toward the end of the session, Christine slid a new folder across the table. The label, Role Adjustment, for review. Inside, a new title, new compensation, new reporting structure, Director of Integrity Operations. I read it once. Closed the folder. I'm not interested in a promotion, I said evenly. Christine held my gaze. We're not offering one, we're offering ownership. That gave me pause. Ownership. Of the very infrastructure Tyler tried to bury, the framework he mocked. The work he saw as legacy clutter now had a department, and I was being asked to lead it. I didn't smile, not because I wasn't satisfied, but because this wasn't about satisfaction. It was correction, long overdue. I'll take it, I said. With 2 conditions. Christine raised an eyebrow. 1, my team, my hiring. I pick who maintains the protocols. No interference. Done. 2, Clause 13F revisions take effect immediately, and I want 13G drafted and ratified by next quarter. She blinked. There's a 13G? There will be. She smiled, barely. You already started writing it, didn't you? I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled a USB drive from my pocket, the same one I used to back up vendor logs before Broxton even had cloud access. This has the updated protocol schema, including deactivation parameters, handoff workflows, and a mirror review toolchain draft. Consider it the foundation. Christine took it like it was a lit match. You realize this department will outlive most of us, right? She said, almost reverently. That's the point. By the end of the week, my office was relocated, not down in the compliance wing, but up near legal and risk. My access badge now cleared every system without pinging security. A new team of analysts started filtering in. Not kids, not interns, professionals, people who knew what it meant to build structure, not just follow it. The plaque on my new door read Director, Integrity Operations in quiet steel. And down on the second floor in the data center Tyler once ordered cleaned out, the servers bearing my custodial signature kept humming, unmoved, untouched, and untouchable. I didn't gloat. Because gloating requires ego, I had something stronger. Proof. 3 weeks later, the old compliance room looked like a museum exhibit curated by someone who finally understood what they'd nearly destroyed. Gone were the metal shelves buckling under unlabeled files and interns' chaotic cleanup piles. The room had been gutted, reorganized, and climate-controlled. A silent hum filled the air, the sound of servers, scanning tools, and biometric vault access in place of shredders and half-labeled banker boxes. And in the center of it all, a glass display case. Simple, sterile, backlit like it held a relic. Inside it sat one thing, my binder, The original. The same three-ring monster Tyler once called compliance compost. Now it was artifact and artifact warning. The label printed beneath it read, Clause 13F, activated 10:02 a.m., no names, no flourish, just time and truth. It wasn't a celebration, it was a timestamp, a record of the moment systems stopped listening to slogans and started protecting themselves. I stood there a minute longer than I meant to, holding a new folder in my hands. Black cover, labeled in my usual blocky handwriting, 13G, immutable oversight. It wasn't protocol yet, but it would be. I slid open the side panel of the case, placed the folder beside the binder, and locked it behind me, not as a symbol, as a warning. Because the real lesson of 13F wasn't revenge, it was resilience. You don't write traps, you build fail-safes, and 13G, it would make sure that next time, the system didn't need me to catch them, just the code. As I turned to leave, I caught the tail end of a conversation just outside the room. A junior exec, new kid, sharp suit, no idea, was walking with someone from legal. He pointed at the display case. Hey, who actually wrote that clause? The lawyer didn't pause. The guy you tried to fire. The kid frowned. Wait, that was her? She was compliance before compliance had a name here, the lawyer said. She didn't fight you, she documented you. Their voices trailed off as they walked away. I didn't correct them, didn't add a footnote or update the signage. I just walked the corridor alone, the same way I had for years. But now, every system I passed, every login I heard, every secured door that clicked shut in my wake, they all bore pieces of the infrastructure I'd built. Quiet authority, not because they gave it to me, but because I made it bulletproof. By the time I reached my office, a fresh email pinged into my inbox, an external partner requesting access to our 13F activation schema for training purposes. I approved it, attached the policy excerpt. No comment. Then I leaned back and let the system I designed do what it was always meant to do, guard itself.